thank you for this opportunity to talk at the Human Rights at 2 or Human Rights at 3. I decided to call this presentation Inspirational Learning. This is just the name for this presentation because I want this presentation to be on the basis of being an inspiration to us if this is something we want to do. So I would give a presentation of what I learned on a conference that was entitled E-Learning in Human Rights Education at the university level that I took part in Stockholm in mid-September, which gathered university representatives, teachers, administrators mainly, who work with e-based tools in university education. So I would like to share what I learned doing this. You have a lot of experience, I know, from using various e-based tools, undertaking courses, etc. So this is only a presentation from I learned, and on basis of that, I would like us to have a discussion. If this is something we're interested in, would we like to do something? If so, what? How is that relating to our work? So that's mainly kind of the context. So I think I will talk for maybe 20 minutes or something like that, and then we will have a discussion based on that. Yeah, so that was just what I said. It's a basis for having an inspired discussion about learning, because that's what we all, in one way or the other, work with. So I would like to actually start with this. How do we learn? And it's not my intention to have a pedagogical discussion, but just generally, how do we learn?
We read.
Yes, we read.
Watch things, we listen to others.
We're interested in something.
Yeah. And how do we do that? How do we?
Google.
We Google. Yeah. Yes. We talk to others. Like you say, Patricia?
Yeah, exchange experience.
Yeah. So what we do in principle is the majority of learning is informal learning. We talk to each other, we search for information, it's not so much formal learning, sitting in a classroom having discussions, but in everything we do in our day-to-day life, we learn things. We learn by doing, we learn by our mistakes, we learn by talking to each other, etc. So informal learning is a very wide concept, but that's the usual way how we learn. And there's something called mobile learning. We learn now in this internet-based life we live. We have our smartphones. We learn on the way to on the bus. And when we stand in line at ICA, you have your cell phone and you can search for information there. So it's a lot of learning has become mobile, and learning is also social. As you mentioned, you discuss, you talk to each other, you learn from each other. So there are all these various forms of learning. So why the e-based learning then? What is the point with having e-based learning? Well, it supports interaction. You can, through different tools, you can interact with peers involved in the same areas. You can communicate with others and collaborate with others. It also promotes students here. I'm using it in a broader context. It's not university students only, but participants, learners, maybe. That would be a better way of putting it. You promote learners to take active part in their own learning, to find information, not only take what is recommended literature, but to actually find solutions to the problems that are posed. You encourage creativity and innovation. For example, there are loads of tools where students and participants would create questions to their peers in an assignment in a class, for example. How can you use different tools to become creative and innovative? It also connects participants outside the formal course to others who are interested in learning. And it's also a possibility to enhance learners' skill sets, to know how to navigate the web and what's out there, and that could be useful for them when taking up positions in different places.
Amelie.
Yes.
What is the definition of e-based learning?
Well, I'm no expert in this. And I'm not sure if it's actually a concept, but I would just like to say that use learning through using tools on the internet, more or less. I think that's what I want to say. Yeah, but it's not a concept as such. It's there are many different concepts, but yeah, that's more what I want to convey. But yeah, please ask questions during the time. But there are so many techniques and so many features, and you know this, of course, that it's important to have a strategy to have as a basis for what you do. So it's important that these e-based tools have a strategy of why they are used, because there are a wealth of resources. There are always new ways of communicating, but you need time and skills and resources to actually do something out of it that feels that it's something that you, as an organization or as a person, you feel is something useful. So it needs to have a thought through. It's so easy to use cool things, but as all of you know, there needs to be a strategy of why using various tools. So I just want to bring that to the table as well. So then this picture, I thought it was very good because Google things, you get thousands of responses in parts of seconds, and you need to be able to know how to actually take that sip out of that full water coming towards you. So I thought that was a good picture of what can be done. And what I would like to do is show you just a glimpse of what is out there. And I'm looking forward to having a discussion because I know many of you have a lot of experiences as well. So I will share what I learned and what I've found out that is available. And then we can use that as a basis for our discussion to know how we actually could take a sip out of this wealth of information. What you think about all this and thinking about the work we do, what could be if our strategies in this and how it could be used to enhance the results we want to achieve through our programs and activities and things we do. So in terms of resources for learning, there are some that are open but with copyright. So iTunes, you know of, TED Talks, I know you've been talking about that. Also Khan Academy is also a resource for a lot of information, but it's copyright, so you can't just share it all over the place. And then there are resources that are open and freely accessible to use, and it's out there. So you can there are syllabuses, there's course material, there's whatnot. So I will just explain to you about this OER Commons. It's a website with information on teaching and learning materials that is freely accessible. And to give you an example, I feel like the chef who has prepared, you put together milk and sugar and then, yes, to save time, I have the cake here. Anyhow, so Google one of these, OER Commons. I Googled human rights, and then you can hardly see it here on the left, but it's you can refine your search to if you want a full course, if you want case studies, if you want games, if you want lecture notes, and then you just click here, and then you can use those resources. So there are so many things, and there's always a tendency that we reinvent the wheel all the time because there are loads and loads of information out there. And then we have something called MOOCs. Does anybody know what that is? Yes.
Yeah.
It's massive online courses that you can take. I also went into one of these and checked out to take one.
Yeah.
And it's free courses with massive amount of students.
It can have like thousands and thousands of students. So it was a concept that was developed by the University of Manitoba in 2008. And as Christina said, there are loads of different courses, and anyone can take them. There are a lot of discussion about the good thing and the bad thing on MOOCs, especially in relation to universities. But just to talk about it in terms of the concept, it's one of the reasons, or that could be that why it was developed, is that it's for studying at the university. It can sometimes be limited in terms of the target group. It might be that you don't have the funds to go to the university, that you are born in a country which don't have university and the education that you want. Now these days, students are more wanting to have a more flexible life in that way. If you're a parent and there's no time to attend classes, or if you're working at the same time, you need to be able to take the classes when you have the time to do it. So with the MOOCs, you can either go a full course and get some kind of diploma afterwards, or you can just take the bits and pieces that you are interested. You can audit the course, for example. And that also corresponds to kind of the learner's need of, you want to get new knowledge in something, and then you can just take that piece of information or that particular session in those courses. Because the statistics say that only between 6 and 7% actually complete MOOCs, and that's not that much. And that maybe is an indication that people have a different expectations of learning. And I will give you then an example of a MOOC to kind of give you a picture. So this is, there are a lot of different providers of MOOCs: Coursera, edX, UNordic. I will save all this information on SharePoint so you can access it later. But this is International Human Rights course. It's done by Olivier de Schutter, and you can audit it. Or you can go for a certificate, and it's there. So, and it runs on its own, so it has exercises you fill in, and it doesn't have to be moderated by somebody in real time, so to say. We'll go back here again. And in terms of looking at it as one example from the cooperation that we have with academic institutions and the role of the university in outreach activity, this could be a possibility of actually reaching to government representatives, other actors in society, to gain knowledge on human rights from the university. So it's interesting from our perspective, both working here in Sweden but also in our partner countries. And then I will give you an example of tools. Okay, this is something that many of you know. It's Bloom's taxonomy, and again, I would leave it to my colleagues to discuss that at another point, but I would just give you as an example of how you learn and what tools are available at each these different steps. And I don't know 3% of the tools available, but I just want to show it to you as an example of various free tools online, doesn't cost anything, to use in order to enhance applying skills for your participants, or analyzing, going through the steps of learning, more or less, up until creating. So there are loads and loads and loads of things. Again, the important is to find out what you want to actually do with it. So, as I said initially, as the music is not in the piano, learning is not in the device. So there are loads of technical possibilities and opportunities, but it's important to consider certain things when you use these tools, or when you want to use these tools. Why do you use it? How do you use it, and for what purposes? So I just want to mention important aspects to consider when using these tools. And this is obvious for us, because we plan our activities with well thought through plan, why we do it, for what target group, what are the results, etc. But again, this is important to think about when we use e-based tools. So of course, the vision for the course, what is the target group, what are the results we want to achieve, what kind of pedagogical approaches do we want to have in our training. And then to capture and finding the resources that we want to use that fit into the strategy that we have for that particular intervention. Video, podcast, student involvement. Why do we want to have podcasts? Why do we want to involve students in different settings? And then how do you want to do the communication between the moderator and the students, and between the students or learners? Do we want to have moderated discussion? Do we want them to discuss themselves? And then how do we encourage learners to cooperate with each other, and what kind of tools do we use for that? And then how do we enhance reflection among the learners to actually reflect on how they learn, and how does that add into the whole activity? And then how do we put it into practice? So my intention is not to dig in deeper to this, but I just want to lift it because it's so easy to get stuck on the cool features that are online, but this is what we do. We think about the pedagogical aspects and why we want to achieve the things that we do. And then there are loads of resources that we can pull into having the particular activity that we have. And then another aspect I also want to bring in, and as lawyers, it's always come to the issue of copyright. And it's not, as our Indonesian participants sometimes say, copyright is the right to copy, but actually the opposite. So it's really an issue, and putting information online, you have to think, am I actually allowed to do this? And there are different laws in different countries. In Sweden, we're very restricted in terms of copyright. You're only allowed to share 15 pages as a maximum of a certain article or textbook to your students, and how does it work online. The tricky thing with Sweden is that we're still applying a copyright law from 1960, which does not entail all of these things. But on the conference, Carl Petersson, he's with the Chancellor's office at Lund University. He gave a presentation on copyright, and he's just 2 blocks away. So I'm sure that we can pull him in to actually ask, okay, so how do we do if we want to move ahead with this? How would we like to do it? And it's different compared to other countries. When Lena and I were in Thailand just a few weeks back, it's the copyright law. Yeah. No, you know as well, same in Laos. It's more generous. You can copy articles and books and just give it to students because it's in a closed setting. So it applies differently in different countries. There's something that has come up that's called Creative Commons. I don't know if any of you, Lotta knows, of course. As you know, with the copyrights, it's the C, and it says all rights reserved. But this is some rights reserved. So it's the possibility of protecting certain aspects of your work. So you can make it available by all, but you can prevent copying, for example. Or, I don't know the details about it, but it's a possibility of partly protecting your work or the information online. So those are things that needs to be brought up as well when putting things in virtual learning environments and online, and even in closed sessions in courses, etc. So coming to the end of my presentation, I'd just like to say this as a kind of introduction to a discussion and to hear your reflections. Because when I undertook this conference, there were many things that came to my mind of what we do, and these are the things that came to my mind. but I think it would be valuable to discuss. You could use like e-based tools in courses in Lund and in partner countries, in master courses, for example. There's something called PeerWise, which also is a free tool where the students would do multiple choice questions for their peers. So you would draft a question, and then your responsibility is also to comment on somebody else's draft question. So therefore you enhance a discussion between the students, and you also allow the students to test themselves. It's amazing what comes out of that student involvement. So that's an example of an e-based tool, so to say. And I mean, it's not an only university concept or a university tool. We could use it for training for municipalities, judges, that we do in Sweden, to just bring in certain, it's kind of a teaching and learning activity to further enhance our learning. And also in regular face-to-face workshops that we have with partners and with participants, to actually include, when internet is stable enough, to include components of exercises online, more or less. And then there's of course the nice concept of MOOCs. It's a lot of developments at the Lund University going on currently, because they will launch MOOCs. I think it's next year, was it? Do you remember? No. Soon. But then also thinking about, from the program perspective, when we work with partners, specifically universities, is this something we want to discuss with them, to have strategies on how could you work with e-learning to enhance, if it's interesting for them, of course, and all based on their needs, but yeah, as a point of discussion. Yeah, that was all from me. Thank you.
Thank you.